It's early in the morning of May 24, 1941. The battleship Bismarck and the escorting cruiser Prince Eugen, under the overall command of Admiral Gunther Lütjens, are making their way through the Denmark Strait in an attempt to break out into the Atlantic to attack British shipping. Trailing behind them are the British heavy cruisers Norfolk and Suffolk, which have been shadowing the German ships since the previous day, just far enough to be out of range of Bismarck's guns. However, closing in on the two German ships are two large British capital ships. The brand new HMS Prince of Wales, equipped with 10 14-in guns, and the large HMS Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy, equipped with 8 15-in guns. Soon, the pride of the Royal Navy would be at the bottom of the sea. In today's video, we're going to cover why the loss of HMS Hood is so hotly debated. I don't want to lead you into the battle too much, because I'm sure a lot of you know it, but Admiral Lancelot Holland, on the bridge of HMS Hood around 300 meters out with Bismarck almost due north of him, decided to increase speed and turn to the northwest to cut Bismarck off. This decision was made with Churchill in mind, who preferred an admiral that kept to the tradition of the service and was aggressive in their actions. Holland could have continued on a westward course and met Bismarck and Prince Eugen in the North Atlantic. Instead, he chose to turn and engage the enemy. In the process, directing the captain of the Prince of Wales, John Leach, to follow him in his movements, and the two large ships maneuvered through the Arctic night. The next morning, with the sun already risen, the opposing ships were 32,000 yards away. At 5:35 a.m., on board the Prince of Wales, the ship's chaplain, W.G. Parker, read a prayer over the ship's loudspeaker. It was a prayer that had been offered by parliamentary forces at the Battle of Edge Hill in 1642. O Lord, thou knowest how busy we must be today. If we forget thee, do not thou forget us. Admiral Holland would open up the battle at 5:52 a.m., firing a salvo at the lead ship in the German formation, which must have been misidentified as Bismarck, but it was actually the Prince Eugen. Bismarck would soon be correctly identified, and the Prince of Wales would shift their focus, while Hood kept tracking the lead ship, Prince Eugen, and she likely shifted her fire from Prince Eugen to Bismarck during the battle. To what effect or what time this occurred, both are uncertain. After her first salvo, the Prince of Wales would suffer from mechanical problems. It would hamper her ability to fight. The Germans began to open fire at about the same time as the Prince of Wales, and at 5:55 a.m., Hood and the Prince of Wales executed a turn of 20 degrees to the port to bring their afterguns into play, as only their forward guns would bear at the angle of the early engagement. It should be noted that both sides were exchanging salvos during this time. The third salvo from Bismarck would hit Hood's boat deck near the main mast, and a fierce fire would break out because of it. At around 6 a.m., as the British ships were making another 20-degree turn, when Bismarck's fist salvo hit Hood, one or two shells fell in the area of the boat deck and possibly near or below the waterline. Hood erupted with flames and exploded, broke in two, and went down within 3 minutes. There's some evidence to say that Hood fired her after 15-inch guns just before the explosion, or simultaneously with the hit. Following the destruction of the Hood, both Prince Eugen and Bismarck concentrated their fire on the Prince of Wales. In the process, they hit the Prince of Wales several times, including the bridge, killing a majority of those in it. However, during the battle, the Prince of Wales scored 2 hits on Bismarck, flooding a boiler room, reducing her speed and causing oil leaks and putting the ship 2 degrees down by her head. A couple minutes after 6 o'clock a.m., the Prince of Wales disengaged and turned away from the German ships, with the Germans electing to go on the same course rather than finishing off the Prince of Wales. The Battle of the Denmark Strait is an incredibly fascinating subject with many controversies around it. We could spend an extended period looking at the battle and its details. But I just wanted to give a general sense of the engagement, as I wanted to spend more time looking at the loss of Hood. To preface this part in the video as a whole, I'm certainly no historian or expert in the field. There are many different theories about how and where Hood was hit. As I've said in previous videos, please do your own research and look into the subject, as there are a wide variety of sources to look at. Also, there's still new information coming out. Link to Denfel's video in the description. Anyway, this video is split into 3 parts: the loss, the different theories of how she was lost, and why it's so controversial. For this part, I'll be getting a lot of my information from R.A. Burt's British Battleships 1919 to 1945, Bruce Taylor's The Battlecruiser HMS Hood and Illustrated Biography 1916 to 1941, along with Dr. Norman Friedman's British Battleships and the HMS Hood Association. For the next part, we'll look at the Board of Inquiry's final report and some of the witnesses to the event. I think it's worth quoting Dr. Norman Friedman here when discussing her loss, where he writes in his book British Battleships 1906 to 1946. The next salvo was apparently just over in the 5th hit and destroyed the ship. Only one observer saw a hit which he stated was in the same vicinity, the main mast rising to a height estimated at 500 to 600 feet. Much wreckage was thrown into the air. The ship was then enveloped in flames and smoke. She heeled a port, then sank within 2 minutes. Let's take a look at an account of one of her surviving crew, Ted Briggs, an ordinary signalman who was on the bridge at the time of the explosion, where he writes, "After the initial jarring, she listed slowly, almost hesitatingly to starboard. She stopped after about 10 degrees, when I heard the helmsman's voice shouting up the voice pipe to the officer of the watch. 'Steering's gone, sir.' The reply of 'very good' showed no signs of animation or agitation. Immediately Kerr ordered change over to emergency steering. Although the hood had angled to starboard, there was still no concern on the compass platform. Holland was back in his chair. He looked towards the Prince of Wales, and then trained his binoculars on the Bismarck. Slowly the hood righted herself. Thank heaven for that, I murmured to myself, only to be terrorized by her sudden horrifying cant to port. On and on she rolled until she reached an angle of 45 degrees. After this, Briggs made his way out of the compass platform along with everyone else who could, except for Holland and Kerr. Briggs continued to move along the Admiral's bridge, and Hood was almost on her beam ends. He was halfway down the ladder when he was washed into the sea with a long ordeal ahead of him. He continues, "This was it. I realized, but I wasn't going to give in easily. I knew the deckhead of the compass platform was above me, and that I must try to swim away from it. I managed to avoid being knocked out by the steel stanchions, but I was not making progress. The suction was dragging me down. The pressure on my ears was increasing each second, and panic returned in its worst intensity. I was going to die. I struggled madly to try to heave myself up to the surface. I got nowhere. Although it seemed an eternity, I was underwater for barely a minute. My lungs were bursting. I knew that I just had to breathe and open my lips engulfed in a mouthful of water. My tongue was forced to the back of my throat. I was not going to reach the surface. I was going to die. As I weakened, my resolve left me. What was the use of struggling? Panic subsided. I had heard it was nice to drown. I stopped trying to swim upward. The water was a peaceful cradle. I was being rocked off to sleep. There was nothing I could do about it. Good night, Mom. Now I lay me down. I was ready to meet God. My blissful acceptance of death ended in a sudden surge beneath me, which shot me up to the surface like a decanted cork in a champagne bottle. I wasn't going to die. I wasn't going to die. I treaded water as I panted in great gulps of air. I was alive. Briggs, Ted Tiburn, and William Dundas, the 3 surviving members of Hood's crew, found themselves on what would have been the port side of Hood, and below them, the pride of the Royal Navy and over 400 men were sinking to the bottom of the ocean. And before I forget, HMS Electra was the ship that picked up the survivors. Following the battle, a board of inquiry was set up, and it was accepted that no witness to the scene could be 100% certain of what happened. But the only certain fact was that the major explosion was in the area of the main mast. Of the evidence presented, let's start with HMS Suffolk and Norfolk, which had a distance of 28 and 15 miles respectively. It was quite difficult to see, but a general impression from the ships is as follows. A fire in the after part of the ship burnt with a clear reddish flame, and it appeared to die down and then increase. This was followed shortly by a big explosion, which took the form of a high sheet of flame shaped like a fan or inverted cone. Clouds of dark smoke surmounted this flame and disappeared. Several witnesses claim seeing a ball or multiple balls of fire showing in the flame of the explosion. As for the Prince of Wales, although being close, many of the observers could not get a clear-cut impression as they were currently engaged with the German ships. What was clear was that a fire had started on the port side of the boat deck of Hood after the third or fourth salvo from Bismarck. Opinions differed to whether it originated for or after the main mast. Most likely it was aft, although it spread quickly, with those describing the fire and the latter appearing different in color. Some observers suggested that the first fire was akin to a gasoline fire, while the latter fire to those who had witnessed cordite fires said it looked like that. As for the explosion, we'll take a look at Captain John Leach's account. I happened to be looking at Hood at the moment when a salvo arrived, and it appeared to be across the ship somewhere about the main mast. In that salvo, there were, I think, 2 shots short and 1 over, but it may be the other way around. I formed the impression at the time that something had arrived on board Hood in a position before the main mast and slightly disturbed. It was not a very definite impression I had, but it was sufficient to make me look at Hood for a further period. I wondered what was the result going to be, and between 1 and 2 seconds after I formed that impression, an explosion took place in the Hood, which appeared to me to come from very much the same position in the ship. There was a very fierce upward rush of flame, the shape of a funnel, a rather thin funnel, and almost instantaneously the ship was enveloped in smoke from one end to the other. Many of the other witnesses associated the explosion with cordite. Another interesting note is that one witness was positive. He saw a complete 15-inch gun turret with 2 guns and a single gun in the air. And 5 other witnesses claimed to have either seen a single 15-inch gun or part of the gunhouse of a turret. Following the explosion, no witness could get a completely clear picture of the Hood as she was enveloped in smoke. To make things even more confusing, witnesses state that Hood had just fired A, B, X, and possibly Y turret, as I had previously mentioned, which could also cause fierce flames and smoke. Because of the mismatch of evidence from the differing witnesses reported to the Board of Inquiry, the cause of Hood's destruction could not be determined definitely. Technical witnesses presented evidence that showed it was obvious that she had been sunk by Bismarck's 15-inch shell, which had struck her in or around the area of the main mast. However, what it was that caused the tremendous explosion was uncertain. Did the 15-inch shell pierce the upper armor belt or enter through the decks, and in what area did it land? It is something that will probably never be fully answered. In the after area of the ship, there were 15-in and 4-in magazines and torpedo warheads, which could have exploded, causing a chain reaction, but the torpedo warhead detonation theory is not exactly sound, as technical witnesses provided 15 points showing how it was unlikely. The board's conclusions, which were submitted on the 12th of September 1941, are as follows. 1. The sinking of the Hood was due to a hit from Bismarck's 15-inch shell in or adjacent to the Hood's 4-inch or 15-inch magazines, causing them all to explode and wreck the after part of the ship. The probability is that the 4-inch magazine exploded first. 2. There's no conclusive evidence that 1 or 2 torpedo warheads detonated or exploded simultaneously with the magazines or at any other time, but the possibility cannot be entirely excluded. We considered that if they had done so, their effect would not have been so disastrous as to cause the immediate destruction of the ship. On the whole, we are of the opinion they did not. 3. That the fire that was seen on Hood's boat deck and in which up and or 4-in ammunition was certainly involved was not to be the cause of her loss. The Board of Inquiry's report can be found in British Battleships 1919 to 1945 and the HMS Hood Association's website. I think it's worth pointing out here the fact that there was another Board of Inquiry. The one that we had just discussed was the second Board of Inquiry's report. It agreed with the first board submission earlier in June 1941 that the fatal hit had been in or near the 4-in or the 15-in magazines, most likely the 4-in magazines. Although the DNC's torpedo warhead suggestion could not be excluded, there was no conclusive evidence of the explosion of one or more torpedo warheads. Moreover, there was no evidence that the torpedo warhead explosion would have been so devastating as to cause the immediate loss of the ship. But I think it's worth pointing out why the loss of HMS Hood is so controversial. That unknown aspect. We will most likely never know for certain what happened. As I mentioned, there are many theories about how Hood sank, including, but not limited, to magazine detonation of the 4-inch ammunition, 15-inch ammunition, or a combination of the two, with the ready-use 4-inch ammunition lockers playing some role. Detonation of torpedo warheads in the area of the main mast, a cordite flash explosion akin to the British battle cruisers at Jutland, high explosive shells from the Prince Eugen causing extreme fires, or the 8-inch shells penetrating the deck, or somehow ended up going down Hood's aft funnel, causing the destruction of the ship. Again, this is not an exhaustive list of the various theories. I'm merely presenting them, and I'm not trying to prove or justify any of them, as that's not what this video is about, as the origin of the explosion is still up for debate, and there will always be doubt about a definite answer. As I'm sure most of you are aware, there are many controversies surrounding this. Less of HMS Hood, and I think it's important to go into them, and I'll break them down into bite-sized snippets so they're easy to digest. HMS Hood was not just another warship. She was for 2 decades the most famous ship in the world. Nicknamed the Mighty Hood, she was a symbol of the British Empire, a floating representation of naval superiority and national pride. When she exploded and sank in under 3 minutes, taking over 400 men with her, it created a level of public trauma that few other naval losses have ever matched. The idea that the pride of the fleet could be destroyed so quickly was unthinkable, and the shock ensured that Hood's loss would be debated, discussed, and memorialized long after the war. At the heart of the controversy is the question, what exactly caused Hood's catastrophic explosion? The official Navy line was that a 15-inch shell from Bismarck penetrated in and around the aft magazines, detonating cordite and blowing the ship apart. However, the precise mechanism remains unclear. Witnesses reported seeing a fire on the boat deck near the main mast prior to the explosion. Some believe that the fire spread to the 4-inch ready-use ammunition lockers and then into the magazines below. Others theorized that a shell had managed to pierce the upper armor belt or slip through the deck armor, which could have been a real possibility. Still, others have suggested less likely scenarios, that Prince Eugen's 8-inch shells could have started fatal fires or that Hood's torpedo warheads detonated in a chain reaction. None of these alternatives have ever been proven, and the fact that the ship disappeared so quickly left almost no time for clear observations. Even underwater surveys of the wreck in 2001 failed to provide a definite answer. The lingering uncertainty has kept the argument alive today. Admiral Holland's decisions in the battle add another layer of controversy. By turning indirectly to cut off the Germans, he limited the British ships to using only their forward guns for the first few minutes, and he presented Hood's deck to the greatest danger. Many have argued that this approach doomed Hood by exposing her weak points. Others argue that Holland had little choice. If he had held back, Bismarck might have escaped into the Atlantic and wreaked havoc on the convoys. Whether his tactics were necessary or fatal errors remains a subject of debate. The chaos of the battle meant that witnesses gave widely differing accounts. Crews aboard Suffolk and Norfolk watched from miles away, described a fan-shaped sheet of flame and clouds of dark smoke rising from Hood. Survivors from Prince of Wales reported fires around the main mast, but could not agree whether they originated forward or aft. Captain John Leach himself recalled seeing a salvo land near the main mast and then an explosion just seconds later. Some men even claimed to see turrets or guns hurl into the air. Others insisted that Hood fired a final salvo at the same moment that she blew up, making it difficult to distinguish between her gunfire and the blast. This patchwork of memories only deepens the uncertainty. Over the decades, a variety of theories have been floated. Some link Hood's loss to the same problem that doomed British battlecruisers at Jutland, unstable cordite and flash protection failures. Others argue that her lack of a major modernization in the 1930s left her fatally outdated by 1941. A few even suggest that it was not Bismarck's guns at all, but Prince Eugen's 8-inch fire that started the chain reaction of her destruction. None of these can be entirely ruled out, and the fact that multiple explanations remain plausible ensures that debates continue. This last one, I think, is the most important. Beyond technical details, the sheer scale of the loss made the event controversial. Hood's destruction claimed over 1,400 lives, leaving only 3 sailors. It was the single greatest loss of life of any British warship during the war. The grief, anger, and national mourning that followed turned her end into a symbol of sacrifice and loss. When the order was given to sink the Bismarck, it was not just a military directive, but an act of vengeance. I will not be giving a personal opinion about the cause of the sinking of HMS Hood, as I have no technical expertise and therefore do not have a valid opinion on the matter. It should be noted that the wreck of Hood was found and examined in 2001, but did not provide any concrete evidence as to exactly where Bismarck's 15-inch shells pierced the armor of Hood. For more information on that, take a look at HMS Hood Association's website. But I hope you all found it interesting to look at the sinking of Hood and the various different theorized ways she could have been sunk. There's certainly more details to be presented about this subject, and I encourage you to look into this more. For instance, in 2025, a new perspective on the loss of HMS Hood from a sailor on Prince of Wales, Len West, from his perspective on the pom-pom deck, in which he saw Hood be hit before she began her turn. As this subject can cause serious arguments, let's all try to be civil in the comments. Please remember to like and subscribe, as it'll help the channel to grow. Until next time, my friends, thanks for watching and have a great week.